It occurs to me before I begin the talk to lay clear a certain idea that some of you may one day appreciate and then actually begin to work at incorporating into your life. Life never stops reminding you of the fact of yourself. But increasingly, because of an identification with the part of yourself that wants nothing whatsoever to do with being reminded of your own emptiness, of your own nothingness, being reminded of what lives in you dormant, waiting to be activated by forces of which you have no awareness. That increasingly a person doesn't want to be reminded. And the interesting thing about the way truth reminds an individual, which is synonymous with awakening, tapping the individual's spiritual shoulder, so as to produce a momentary awareness of their actual estate. What's interesting is that the reason for being reminded is as forgotten as one's willingness to be reminded. See, when you get angry at somebody or you're suddenly faced with a situation in which or over which you feel powerless, maybe something's coming, maybe something's gone by, it makes no difference what you call the future or the past. It's all a play of the consciousness. Is that all of those moments, all of those events, those impressions, they're all presented in the form of a reminder. But mostly we don't want to be reminded. Here comes an event, I'm not prepared for it. Or I don't feel that I understand or that I can produce what has to be done. I'm just not up to it, in quotes. And so the event has come, and rather than meet the event and allow it to reveal what it has come to do, what it has come to remind me of. See, when an unwanted moment comes, the perception is that it has come to show me, to prove to me my inadequacy, to prove to me my anger, my depression, my fear. In other words, it comes as a form of punishment, and I have to, at all costs, avoid this thing. But that isn't why it's come at all. It appears as it does because in reminding you of the actuality of your level of being, it's asking you in the same moment, would you like to exchange that level of being for something else? That's what it's come for. That's what it brings. That is what it allows. But you don't meet moments that way. The instantaneous reaction rises up as a result of a nature that resists at all cost anything that reveals to itself the truth of itself. You want to know why your mind races? It's racing to escape revelation. You want to know why you have so much tension or anger in you? It's the product of a heart that has steeled itself up behind walls that want nothing to penetrate them, that show it the truth of its own emptiness. See, you're afraid of being nothing. It's your only hope. You're afraid of being nothing. It's your only hope. Besides which, what does the fear of being nothing fill you with? Does it fill you with, does it verify that you're good, that you're wise, that you're kind and strong, loving the way you imagine yourself to be? Do all of your relationships that you pour yourself into, incidentally, not so that you can give something to them, but so that you can momentarily fill up this vacancy that exists inside of you that can never be filled, regardless of how much you pour into it. The journey home always starts in the direction of home, but the first direction is not towards fulfillment. The first direction is not towards wholeness, at least ostensibly to the seeker. The first direction is towards emptiness. The first direction is towards nothingness. The first direction is down, even though down is up, but not to the one who goes. There are laws. That's one of the things that the seeker has to eventually understand, that would that life, followed all of our laws. How nice and convenient that would be if, I've established a law. You're supposed to be nice to me. I've established a law. God is supposed to care about me. I've established a law. I shouldn't have been punished the way that I was. I've established all these laws that my happiness should come to me in such and such a way, and that I should never be challenged by anyone or anything. Those are the laws. And if we can see it, what happens consistently is that the reason we become so upset is that someone didn't get the memorandum with the laws written out on it. But we must use our present experience sufficiently, wisely enough to begin to understand that just as I get into my car, and if I roll through a stop sign, or I don't give way to a pedestrian, or I exceed the limit that the speed allows, that just as there are laws that while I'm driving, I'm not thinking to myself, I'm going to be breaking the law. I just do it because it's not something that I recognize as being, that I have to be attentive to. I'm above the law most of the time. But the fact of the matter is, I'm never above the law. The fact of the matter is, I merely escape the consequences of dreaming that I am. And the rude awakening is being stopped by the officer and being given a ticket, if that should happen to me. And just as there are laws that govern this physical world, there are laws that govern the world above it. And to make it clear, because you can never point, you can't say, oh, look, there's the world above this one. Wouldn't that be convenient? But the proof that there is a world above this world is that I can fulfill all the laws in this world to a T. and still not be happy. Still feel a divine discontent. And fortunately for the seeker, the rules of the world above the world that we're in are themselves the predecessor. They are the platform. They are the reflection that we see in this world. See, we think we see something that's solid in this world. We do not see solid things in this world. We see the reflection of the world above us. In this instance, the law that says, if I want to be a successful business person, in this world, I'm going to have to exchange my life and my time for what I expect to get out of what I do. That's the law. The law in this world is if I want to be an excellent athlete, if I want to have a healthy body, I'm going to have to eat the right foods and take care of the body and teach it what it needs to be taught. Those are the laws. And those laws all point to a very specific condition. And the condition is, if you want this, you have to give up that. That's the law in this world. I must exchange my time, my energy for what I want. I want people to like me. So I will exchange quite often my soul. I'll give up what I know is right and good in order to win their approval. I exchange myself for one thing so that I can have it. Those laws that we can see active in this world and to which we must be properly passive in order to reconcile the marriage of those things, that the outcome can be produced, that the fruit of this world may be known. The exact same thing holds true in the world above us. Only we don't know anything about that. All of life is predicated upon exchange. All of life. Think for a minute what that means, if you can, just for a second. See, I get up, I ask who wants to talk about, who did their exercise, who's done some work. And I look out and I see no hands. You know what that tells me? It tells me that you didn't make any exchange. Because you see, when you make an exchange in the higher world, it is always the experience of being renewed. New understanding is the result of exchanging old understanding because you were reminded by the event that it doesn't work. Were you able to make the transition with me? New understanding flowers naturally. It is part of the exchange. Nothing can stop it. New understanding comes when the event comes along and by its appearance proves to me that my former understanding is of nothing, is of no use. In the realization, in the reminder, in the gentle, graceful, justice-laden reminder that the impression brings, I'm offered the possibility of making an exchange. But you see, I won't exchange. No one will. Will you exchange something greater for something less? You know, that sounds ludicrous, doesn't it? Here, I'm going to give you $5. I want your BMW. I'm going to give you 5 minutes of my attention and I need you for 3 days starting tomorrow. Does anybody make an exchange like that? Why? It's not equitable. We don't understand spiritual equity. Every moment of life is exchange. If it weren't, and if life weren't sustaining itself and holding itself taut against the degenerative movement of time, if life weren't holding itself by a force equal to or greater than what is entropic, everything would just disintegrate. And there is an exchange taking place at all moments like that. But we know so little of that exchange because we're busy making unequitable, iniquitous exchanges. I tried to show you as best I was able to, can't always do it well, when we met, that there was a much greater lesson behind every single experience that a person has. And that the much greater lesson that sits behind all of the experiences a person has is what must be gradually understood and received if one is to use every moment as intended, as the platform for exchanging who they have been for the newness they are yet to be. I made a point of talking to you about, and then I went through several illustrations, the old expression, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. The teacher appears. The reminder comes. And the teacher brings what to us? What does the teacher bring to us? A lesson. Now, apart from the unfathomable, impossible to gauge possibility that somehow somebody from India, who I never met in my life and never will know personally, could set the stage to remind me of my own nothingness so that it could be exchanged for a gentleness, the possibility that such a thing could be conspired like that, created, and bring that moment where the teacher appears in the guise of a phone call from a salesperson, in the guise of somebody who doesn't gives you the wrong change, or who disrespects you, that you've never met, but it happened to fit in perfectly with everything else that went that day that didn't go right, so that you're sitting there taut like a piano string until somebody goes bing, and then you go boom, and you're gone. And the possibilities of all that happen, nobody ever stops to think, how could all of that happen so perfectly? That the teacher could be right there, and there's the lesson. And what's the lesson? How do I get the lesson? Isn't it? It's the lesson is clearly something reminding me, say, look, see, you forgot what you're like. You were asleep. You were dreaming that you were someone or something, that you were going somewhere, that you had people that loved you. You were all wrapped up in that. And then all of a sudden, hello. Oh, there's the lesson. There's the lesson. But living inside of us is something that does not want the lesson. And listen what happens when one doesn't want the lesson that is brought in the form of a reminder saying, will you exchange your life? And we still have to get to what you exchange your life for, but we'll get there. In that moment, the teacher and the lesson are absolutely inseparable. That moment and what I call my reaction to it is not a reaction to the appearance of that teacher, of that experience. The reaction is the reflection of the experience. It's one thing. And in the clarity of that teacher and lesson being one thing, can take place one of two things. There can either be the rejection, the deflection of that moment of being tapped on the shoulder and saying, will you see yourself as you are? So that the lesson is rejected, which means all that has gone through time to produce its appearance is summarily dismissed, or the lesson can be received. Why don't I want? First of all, I have to kind of trap you a little bit. How many of you want the truth? Yeah, give me the truth. I love the truth. I mean, yeah, isn't that? Because that's what I say. I love the truth. I want the truth. The truth will set me free. Yay, truth, yay, truth. Here's the truth. When the moment comes and it shows you your abject nothingness, the violence, the anger, the fear, the jealousy, the greed, when it shows you the ugliness in there, that's the truth that sets you free. Why? Because in the same moment of that revelation is presented the possibility of entering into the exchange that is taking place in that moment that is part of its revelation. Because I said there was something hidden behind the appearance of the teacher and the lesson. Because without the teacher and the lesson, if it's refused, there's no realization of my estate as it is. And if there's no realization of my estate as it is, then I can't be possibly willing to exchange it, can I? Most of those moments is not just a rejection of my estate, it's the protection of it. Isn't it? You know, you don't have to protect yourself from what I'm saying. You mustn't protect yourself from what I'm saying. You must open yourself as wide as the doors can possibly be opened. Because I'll tell you something you may not want to hear. Until what I am telling you is your understanding without thinking about it, you can't go any further. It's impossible. It's impossible. In the moment of the teacher and the lesson comes the possibility of the realization. But the only way the realization takes place is when one exchanges themselves for the whole of the moment. Why? Because the teacher and the lesson and the realization are not separate things. And more importantly, they prove by the whole of the Trinity that they represent that something greater than yourself sits behind the experience. Person always says, I want to know, is there a conscious circle of humanity? I want to know whether there's a kingdom of heaven, whether there's a nirvana. I want to know whether or not there are these kingdoms replete with various gods and all of the things that one can go through on their way through the upper kingdoms. I want to know all that. I tell you that you're created to know that. More important, all that you want to know is already a part of you, but you summarily reject its presentation. Every time. Because you can't know what is above you without exchanging yourself. Exchanging myself for what? When we talked about the fact that there is the teacher, the lesson, and the realization, we went on and we talked about the idea that in any moment there is an impression that comes along representing the teacher, and that the impression, when it comes, produces inside of an individual by the very fact of its appearance, it produces the impression, produces a revelation, produces the appearance of the consciousness of what it touches in an individual. The appearance of what is touched in an individual, that revelation, invites the one within whom that is taking place to not just see what has been revealed in them as a result of the impression, but to recognize in the same moment. Of course, there are moments where an impression comes and there's something that's revealed that's beautiful, harmonious, kind. Of course, we're not talking about that. We're talking about what does it take to change the kind of human being that I am. And I would add that even those moments when an impression comes and one has a revelation of some noble character, something kind, uplifting, encouraging, even in those moments, if one mistakes those revelations for being the same as himself or herself, meaning the identification with that revelation, all the meaning of that moment has been lost. Greedily gobbled up like some kid with cotton candy at the fair, thinking that he'll never get that sweet again. I don't know if you know this. Have you ever heard the expression Via Dolorosa? It's often connected with the Stations of the Cross. It's also called the meaning of Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrow. The interesting thing about this way of sorrow is that it is the path. But it's the path not because it is sorrowful. It's the path because one gradually starts to see, even though they don't want to see, that time and time again, and I ask you to weigh what I'm saying against your own experience. How many times have you fixed yourself? How many times have you fixed yourself? Struggled to bring something in, physical or psychological or even spiritual, to reconcile what you were shown about yourself? Can you count the number of times that you've fixed yourself? Truth of the matter is, human beings, they spend all of their lives trying to fix themselves, and they can't go on. That's when why do people get stuck in the past? Why am I stuck with a resentment? Why am I stuck with a regret? Why am I stuck with this sense of inadequacy? Whatever I'm stuck with, this anger, why am I stuck with it? Because I haven't figured out how to fix it yet. What if there was nothing to fix? What if there was nothing to fix? What if it had been done and you just didn't know it? Because that's the case. That's the case. Remember I said to you, it might have been the same talk that I'm pointing to now or before it. People, please God, make my life better, help me. And if we could hear him, we would hear him say, but I've already done it. I've already taken care of it. You just can't see it. See what? See that every moment that produces itself in front of you brings itself to you so that in the revelation of your character, by the light that is supreme, you can see everything that is not light in you. By the wisdom of conscience, you can see where you are unconscionable. By the presence of an understanding that can't be measured, you can see where your own understanding falls short. And instead of trying to protect yourself by exchanging blame or whatever one turns to reconcile the moment so they can fix it and get on with their life. Instead of doing that, sit there and make the exchange, which is what? I let the whole that I see. Look, try to see this. Here comes a moment I don't want. What do I see when a moment comes that I don't want? What am I looking at when the moment comes I don't want? I'm looking at the object, the person, the condition. I'm looking at my past. I'm looking at the future. Yes or no? Here's the moment. That's what I'm looking at. And if I'm not looking at it, in quotes, then I am looking at the pain I am in because of it. And if I'm not looking at the pain I'm in because of it, in quotes, then I am looking at what my pain is telling me to do about what I see. Yes or no? All doing what? All creating this fervent sense of myself apart from the teacher, separate from the lesson, and having nothing to do with anything that would actually reconcile the condition in my consciousness that produced it. Instead, all dedicated unbeknowingly towards, without understanding it, towards what? The propagation, the continuation of the very nature that God in his grace keeps sending the reminder to so that I could exchange it, not for a better time to come, not for a better me that might be there, and certainly not for the promise of a power or a pleasure to replace all of it, but that the whole thing could be exchanged at once. Because the fact of the matter is the whole thing is being exchanged at once. That's why there's nothing to fix. Interesting word, fixed, fixation. Fixed on what he did, what she said, where I'm going, what I've got, what I need. Fixed on my family and the relationship. Fixed, fixed, fixed. And you know, you can't, to the point, you can't be fixed on anything and be fixed. Be made whole. Even that's a misnomer. Did you know that? The idea of being made whole. I have a whole talk coming up on the subject. You can't be made whole. You're created that way. But in order to understand the holiness that gave you life and put your life here on this planet for its purposes, you have to understand its laws, and its laws are exchange. Let me tell you a story. Take a deep breath. Imagine a community of some kind. I don't know where. And pretty much everybody in the community does a little work. There are always those who think themselves clever. And the ones who think they're clever are always the ones who do the very least work and yet want the most appreciation for it. Or who look like they're doing the most but actually do nothing whatsoever. They're nothing but takers. See, you can't take from life and properly be in exchange with it. But the fact of the matter is that those who take from life like that, they are making an exchange, only it's an exchange that is nothing but sorrow. They don't know until they get to the end of all their activity and find out, look what I've taken nothing. There are those people, and then there are people who do their fair share. And then this story is about one woman. And long before everyone gets out into the field, she's there working, and long after everybody's gone, she's there working. And it's a new development. She wasn't always like that. One day, her friend, interesting, her friend is bothered by the fact that she's doing more work than anyone else. You know, that's our culture. That's the whole of our society. Literally being strangled to death, choked. But fortunately for her friend, we'll call her Mary, Mary goes out and she sees Millie working out there. And says, Millie, I want to ask you a question. I don't mean to pry or anything like that, but I just want to know. I've noticed of late that you are rising early and working later than before. I'm just wondering what's going on. How come you're doing it? Why are you working like that? Because I know you're suffering. It's hot out here. It's hard work. Millie looks at her and she says, well, I don't know if you'd understand. Well, try me. Okay. It's the only way that I know to keep myself from suffering over actions that I usually don't know I'm in the middle of doing until it's too late. Excuse me, Mary said. You're out here suffering to avoid suffering? I don't understand that at all. Well, I told you I didn't really expect you to. Well, can you please help me understand it? I found, said Millie, that over the last several years, there's been a certain revelation that's come to me. Well, what kind of revelation? I've been working for an idiot, she said. What do you mean working for an idiot? You shouldn't say that about the people that employ us. I'm not talking about our employer. I'm saying that I've noticed increasingly that most of what I do it for the wrong reasons. And then I don't know that I'm doing it for the wrong reasons until I get to the end of that particular line of thought, a feeling of action, and then I get there and I find that I'm not only empty, but then I've been blaming. I don't want to suffer anymore the way I've been suffering. She says, I still don't understand, Millie. Why this? She says, by working in the fields, at least I'm suffering for what I know is true. See, I know that what I was working for was false because a real reward doesn't come with what I do. But working out here, I know that I'm suffering for what's true. I'm suffering to feed my family. This is a spiritual story. I'm suffering to be able to supply my interior needs, to meet what is required by all of me, that it's sustained and grows. I'm working for that, and I'm working for others too. Not because I want to work for others. She said, I'm the most selfish sot that ever walked the planet. But see, I didn't know that. But it was in being reminded of that over and over again by the emptiness, the nothingness of my experience, that finally proved to me that that was the case. And once that was clear, then it was easy to want to suffer for something other than myself, to give myself to something that made no sense even to me. Millie said, what's it like? Mary said, what's it like? And Millie said, look, the only other thing I can tell you is that I listen please, that I have found a certain kind of peace in suffering for what I know is good. A peace that I didn't have before and that I only have now because I was willing to exchange myself for what I understood. That's the way of sorrow. Of seeing slowly, and it has to come slowly. It has to come slowly. Your utter reliance upon everyone and everything outside of you so that in that utter reliance of everyone and everything outside of you, including your own thoughts and feelings, which is your principal dependency, so that because of that, you never have to go through anything other than blaming something instead of exchanging yourself for the event that shows you the necessity for it. Second story. Take a nice deep breath. You understand you're not being scolded. Some of you look like you're 3 years old out there. God is good. It's you who are afraid of what you see. It's you who don't want the event to be crystal clear as the revelation of your nature. Because the nature that resists and rejects the revelation has no place in the kingdom of heaven. It has no way that it can exchange itself save for something less or equal than itself. That's all it can do. So only you, meaning the part of you, the real I part of you that can hear what I'm saying, only that part of you can begin to see, okay, here's the impression, here's the revelation, and clearly these things have come not as separate entities, but as one thing to produce what? To produce a reconciliation so that that which has been revealed by the moment exits the moment different than what it entered it as. But only if I'm willing to exchange myself. Before I tell you the other story, I'll tell you something real quick, because it's an important part of this talk. Those of you that don't know Christian scripture, there comes a point at which Jesus and the disciples have gone up the mountain. Jesus, knowing that Judas has gone to the Sanhedrin, gone to the Jewish hierarchy, in order to sell him out, that they might find him because they were looking for him. And it's all in that one marvelous story, that interior representation of making the exchange of the part for the whole. That not only is there all of this business, not my will be done, but thy will be, all those things that you know if you know anything about Scripture, but it's all brought to a special head that nobody really sees, which is what? Here come the legionnaires, here come the Romans. And the story goes that Peter ran out and grabbed a sword and smite one of the legionnaires and cut off his ear. And Jesus said, put away your sword. And then he put the ear back on the man and all that business. And then it's thought that he was captured. He wasn't captured. He gave himself. He was not captured. That's what we think. Oh, because if I'm him, I don't want to be captured, especially since I know what's going to happen. No, he gave himself. Why? Because it was a mandatory step in the exchange. And why would he agree to an exchange like that? Now put yourself in the place, in scale, which is what we must do. Put yourself in the place of Christ. Here comes somebody, here comes something I have to do. I'm inadequate to it. Here comes a moment I'm afraid of. Meaning, here come the legionnaires. Here comes something to take me away and put me in prison and crucify me. I'm not going to agree to that. For one thing, my belief somehow or other that I'm not adequate proves somehow that I am, so I want to push things away until I can get prepared. No, that moment one says, okay, I see the whole of this moment. I don't just see the legionnaires, meaning I don't see just the person who disrespected me. I don't just see my past that seems to be hounding me. I don't just see my fear that seems to be running at me. I don't see just that. Because if I see just that, then all that nature can do is react and respond and try to free itself, escape the condition. And I don't just see poor me. Poor stupid me, poor inadequate me, poor me who never got this, who never got that, who was put through all this. I don't just see that either, because that's what the moment the legionnaires want to remind me of. The reaction to the appearance of an adversary proves that there's something inside of myself that's about to be captive and captured that should be, otherwise they wouldn't be coming. No, I don't just see that, and I don't just see this part of me that's rejecting it. I see just the same thing as Christ did. That this thing is part of a greater exchange for a greater purpose than my individual existence, than my individual life, than my individual concerns, which, by the way, are mostly about how to avoid conflict, how to free myself from problems. I don't exist for the sake of freeing myself from my own pain. I exist so that the nature that is inherent in that pain and that produces it can be exchanged into something greater than itself, so that the whole of humanity, including my own heart, is changed by that action, by that choice that agrees to the exchange of the whole for the part. Then I'm not afraid. The way of sorrow, it's just an interesting thing. It's just something I'm interested in, the way of sorrow. The stations, the 7 stations, actually some of them talk about 14 stations, but there's 7 principles. 2 of the 7 stations show Christ having fallen on the way to the crucifixion. Now, why would that be an important thing? He's a God-man. Surely a God-man doesn't fall. Surely a God-man doesn't sweat blood. The revelation must be entire. And incidentally, it is. See, that's the point. In order for the reconciliation to be complete, the revelation must be entire. The more the revelation is twisted or turned by a mind that refuses to see what it has shown, the less active and possible is the reconciliation produced in that same moment, meaning the whole of the moment no longer serves the purpose that it was given to you and that you were given it to it for. Sorry for that language. A princess once went to her father and said to him, "I've noticed something, Father. I want you to explain it if you have a moment." Wouldn't it be nice if people were polite? Instead of walking up and thinking that the whole world is waiting for you and your question. Princess walks up and says, "I've noticed something, Father." "What is it, daughter?" "I have a few minutes. What can I tell you?" "I've noticed that there's something that is constantly going on in this kingdom." "What is it, daughter?" Of course, he knows. He said, "Well, it always seems like there are some in the kingdom who are invited and actually helped to move nearer to the center where you are, Father, but that none of them can move nearer to the center without some of them moving out further. So that I see a kind of dynamic where on one hand something is moving in and at the same time something seems to be moving out. And clearly moving nearer to the center of the kingdom is better, because that's where the most strength, the protection, the light is the brightest, where all of the activities that are part of the kingdom are more evident. And the further out you go, the more rage, the more problems there are, because they're not as carefully watched over. What causes that? Who gets to come closer and who gets to go away further? And who would want to make that choice anyway? The father looks at her, he says, yes, he says, you're right. I make the choice. You make the choice? Oh yeah. What? Isn't that kind of judgmental, Dad? Because I don't judge anyone. They judge themselves. How do they judge themselves? Well, he said, it's kind of a family secret, but since you're about to become of age, I'll share it with you. See, on a daily basis, I send out thousands of ministers. And I send them out all over. And what do you send them for? He said, well, some I send in order to give people things, invitations to move closer, gifts of the kingdom. Well, what about the others? Well, I still send them gifts, but it looks different. I send the ministers to ask them for something that's important to them. Let me get this straight. You say it's a gift whether you're giving someone something or you're asking them for something? He says, oh, absolutely. How so? And what has that got to do with those that move closer and those that move further away? And he said, you see, daughter, whoever receives my ministers, who welcomes them into their home and responds willing to make the exchange, whether it's just their time to receive the gift or whether it's to actually give up what they've been asked, whoever does not receive my minister, that individual does not receive me. And whoever doesn't receive me, it's a simple exchange. Those who do come in, those who don't go out. What does that mean, that little story? It means that every moment is a minister. In a sense, every moment is ministering to your interior life. By ministering, I mean that it is never-endingly bringing things. Some things are beautiful, some things are joyous. I said that, I agree with it wholeheartedly. But to become identified with a boon, with a gift, with a grace, is actually no different than refusing to exchange what you're shown when the moment comes and the minister saying, look, will you give me this? Why do I protect my own nothingness? Is the anger over not being respected the same as being respectable? Is it? Is it my rejection of you for having rejected me prove that I am somehow or other a worthy human being? You must do the interior math, meaning to see the laws, so that it's quite clear to you. Life never stops bringing us, moment after moment, in the simplest conversations with each other. Somebody comes and wants to have a word with you. What's your usual reaction when someone wants to have a word with you? Come on, what is it? Basically, leave me alone. I have more important things to do. Translation, I am more important than you are. Translation, I believe that there is something valuable in me, where if there was something valuable in me, I wouldn't be someone rejecting the moment where you came and showed me there was nothing valuable. Just the illusion of being someone special. That's all. That's why it's called the way of sorrow. Because listen to this strange paradox. You must eventually see beyond the shadow of a doubt that the only thing you have to exchange for the kingdom of heaven and its fullness is your nothingness. All you've got. But we don't call it nothingness. And who knows why we don't call it nothingness? Because our suffering dresses it. because our suffering dresses it. See, if I can suffer over what I'm shown, then it proves that I'm different than what I was just revealed as being. Do you understand that sentence? I look at myself and I hate myself for being weak, inadequate, frightened, depressed. I hate myself for being so jealous and critical. I hate myself. I hate myself. Yeah, see, that is what? That is the rejection of the revelation, because the suffering validates the nothingness. Instead of exchanging what you see and what is for something that incorporates it and transforms it in the very moment of the experience. What's the point of this talk? You know, it's kind of important, if I don't actually make one for you, that you come to a certain conclusion, not in terms of a finality, but an understanding. Let's see, what was he talking about for the last 56 minutes? He was saying that every moment in itself, these active, passive, and reconciling forces, this teacher, the lesson, and the realization it brings, the impression, the revelation, and the reconciliation, that these things are not separate things at all, that they do not belong to a moment here and then a moment there and then an action that follows, but that they reveal all at once a beautiful, constant, loving intelligence that is never not underneath everything that's transpiring. And that I'm invited to make an exchange, to lose my life as it is shown to me as being empty, as being angry, frightened, all the things that it's shown, that I'm invited to give that up in exchange for a relationship with that which is always filling itself, with that which doesn't die. The only way that a man or a woman begins to understand and to begin to make the choice that we're talking about is when they see everything that we've just described as being factual. Some things are too beautiful, too deep, and too mysterious to be put into words. And this topic, this idea of this living triad, of the act of creation itself and the cost of it, the exchange required for it, this is one of those ideas. That the heart would never be heavy, the mind would never be afraid, the body would never be tense, if one understood that at every moment they are invited to exchange the whole of themselves for something that cannot be made angry, frightened, or tense.